Okay, today we're going to talk about sustainable supply chains and their multi-level connectivity, and I'm going through this topic using 4 histories, and at the end we are going to do some final thoughts about the talk. So my first history here is at an individual level, a history of power. And why I call this a history of power? As Anwar said, when you drink a cup of coffee, you are completing the final link in a global chain of activities that made that cup of coffee possible. That simple act, that daily simple act of sipping your coffee connects you immediately to peasant farmers in Colombia and Indonesia, to dog workers in Sao Paulo and Mombasa, New Orleans and San Francisco, and so many others in between. So this is how individuals can connect to the world. We as individuals connect to the world through supply chains, because almost everything that we buy, use or consume in our daily activity comes from supply chains. For instance, cars, planes, satellites, laptops, border wars, and of course services as well, comes from different supply chains that took their processes and several parts of the processes of the supply chain in different parts of the world, in different locations. So we as individuals can exert this kind of power by choosing what we are going to buy. We have this power to decide what we are buying and what we are using and what we want to consume. And this kind of power it's actually a huge power, and it's a power that connects us with the world through this supply chain activity. And the power of consumers actually quite like a real power. I mean, this is and that's why I call it a history of power, and of course a history of connection to how individuals can connect to the world in their daily activities. Our second one at an organizational level is a history of trade-offs. Okay, organizations are related also through this trade and commercial activities. So, as Dr. Mamun said, we have several participants, several actors in the supply chain, as suppliers, factories, distributors, retailers, and so on. And as Dr. Mamun said, also they are connected through different flows, like financial flows, material flows, and information flow. So they need to manage properly these flows through the whole supply chains and make this connection works in order to fulfill our customers' expectations. And here, this is when our first trade-off appears, because these organizations need to decide. Mostly their decisions have to be made between a high-quality service and what is the cost of this high-quality service. So they have to take this kind of decisions of how could be my service and what it's going to be the cost of this service. And of course, if I want to a high quality service, sure, it's going to be small, much expensive. So this is our first trade-off, and a trade-off means like I need to sacrifice something. I need to give something, but I need to sacrifice as well another thing. And years later, we also have to adhere some environmental concerns to our supply chains in order to achieve a circular economy. So we need to incorporate in the supply chains some new operations or new processes, such as reverse logistics, for instance, or reduction at source, or provide different incentives to participants in order for them to acquire this sustainability or this pro-environmental practices. And another trade-off appears then because companies also, again, they need to decide how many pro-environmental initiatives they want to deploy, because they thought that these pro-environmental initiatives were against the firm's profitability. So this is our second trade-offs here, and this is why I call this a history of trade-offs. Then, years later, at a sustainability level, we have this three-axis sustainability model of social concerns, economic growth, and environmental issues. And I call it a history of togetherness. Of course, we all know that according to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations is promoting, we need to achieve this Sustainable Development Goal towards the year 2030. That is the year of non-return. So we have a stress deadline actually for this. But the problem is that we not go further too much on this issue. All nations across the world, most of the nations, are in an inexplicable inertia. So a few was doing, and probably nothing was doing from some countries regarding this 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So we have actually a huge problem with that. And this inertia is probably due because nations, individuals, and organizations as well were trading instead of synergizing. So as we were saying, when you trade, when you do some trade-off, you have to sacrifice something. And we're sacrificing all the time, all these years. Instead of doing synergies, instead of seeking for the goodwill and wealth of every stakeholder in the system. So probably it's one of the main problems here. And even when these 17 Sustainable Development Goals are quite different and have specific targets, there are multiple synergies as well as trade-offs among them. So as the same in the organizational level, the organizations were connected inside the supply chain. The sustainable development goals are also interconnected among them. They maintain several synergies and trade-offs among them. For instance, this SDG number 7, that is clean and affordable energy, and the SDG 13, that is climate action, could possibly be considered as global enablers because of their direct relation through synergies with at least 13 of the 15 SDGs left. I think there was no direct connection with the SDGs about reduction inequalities and gender inequalities, I guess. But I mean, SDGs are strongly interrelated among them. So that's why it's so hard to achieve sustainability. This is why it's so hard to synergize instead of trading. So I have this example in order to be clear of what I'm saying. These port city relationships, for instance, postal cities have ports, and we all know that ports deliver the different benefits, financial benefits for cities. So they promote industry, innovation, and better infrastructure. We always are investing in expand operational capacities of ports. That in order to achieve this work and to economic growth of the city and for the country as a whole, that we're trading as well, because it's too hard for a coastal city to achieve itself as a sustainable city. I mean, to become a sustainable city, because we have pollution in the water, we have pollution in the air, we have uncomfortable noises, we have traffic in the city, we have delinquency, and we have organized crime as well. So it's still complicated to get rid of this kind of trade-off. So we need to provide, so we need to pay attention to this. We need to provide a good standard for living to the people in the coastal city. So we promote decent work and economic growth through port-city relationships, and we need to connect organizations as well in order to construct, to build this maritime supply chain through the port. But we have all these problems at the sustainability level. So we need these three levels: the individual, the organizational, and the sustainability level, fully interconnected. And before I go through this, and this is why I call this togetherness, history of togetherness, because we need to think, we need to start to think in the world as a unique world, as a one world for all of us, and we need to fulfill all the expectations of the stakeholders related to. And the last level is a global risk level, and my last history is a history of sleepless routine. And why I call it history of a sleepless routine is because more times all these changes, we need to be aware of what is happening every time and every day. Sorry for this chart is in Spanish, but I'm going to translate this first row in here. It says that the World Health Organization predicts by the beginning of 2019 that there is a probability of 1.5% of a severe pandemic occurs at the beginning of the 2019. So a year later, we have the coronavirus. It happened, and it almost dismantled all our supply chains, as we know. And when it's so important to think about this COVID-19 as in a global risk level, because this is the graphic of the global risk report of the 2020 of the World Economic Forum. So we have the coronavirus here as an infectious disease. As you can see, is in the periphery. I mean, this is not too much. This is a global risk with not too much centrality. Actually, I mean, there are worst scenarios. So coronavirus is here, and this is this kind of crisis, this kind of global risk is actually fully interconnected with so many others. How we can read this? For instance, if appears something like COVID-19, of course, it's going to be water crisis in the countries and in the world. That is going to lead us to a climate action failure. And this is going to lead us as well to a food crisis, to extreme weather, and to biodiversity loss. That is actually happening. So this is how global risks are fully connected to in this fourth level, and it forces us to think of this interconnectedness if we want to take decisions and actions regarding supply chains, regarding global supply chains. And I have an example for this. For instance, copper, lithium, nickel, and cobalt, they are products of mining sector. And what was happening with this, due to the coronavirus outbreak in the world, the people were not allowed to work as usual because they were under quarantine, they were under confinement in their homes. And of course, the mining sector were struggling for productivity, lack of labor, and with no productivity, with no labor or restricted labor conditions, we are unable to build the technological devices that prompt cleaner energy. So this is where when we understand this kind of situation as a symbiotic circle, we need to understand and we need to begin to think of this kind of problems as integrated in this 4-level model. So these are the 4 levels that I explained before. Just to summarize, we have people connected in the first level as individuals. We have organizations connected within the supply chains. We have the sustainable development goals also fully connected among them, as we explained before. And as we just explained, and this is where this figure of the World Economic Forum works. These global risks are fully interconnected among them too. But this is not all. Actually, we need to think about this 4 level, not just connected among them, but of course we have this fully interconnected model between the 4 levels as well. So if something like COVID-19 crisis happens again, of course it's going to be, of course it's going to have several effects on sustainability, on supply chains as individuals, and so on. Finally, just to finish my presentation, I wanted to provide I don't know how to say this, like light in the darkness or something like that. Like that it's possible to find some industries with more synergies than trade-offs. A world with trade-offs, of course, is possible. And actually, we have no time for trade-offs. I mean, the deadline is 2030, and we need to, of course, decide for doing more synergies. And fish meal supply chain could be an example. So fish meal is produced using this pelagic species. Pelagic species of fish, there are small fish, and these fish are not so popular with human consumption because of their taste and because of their size. So we use this fish to do fish meal, and fish meal is the primary supply for one of the more sustainable industries to produce food for world's population, that is agriculture industry. So we need fish in order to feed other fish that is for human consumption. So and why is this is not a trade-off, and this is a huge synergy, not just because the importance of the industry, this agriculture industry, and not just because we are using a fish that it's not so popular for human consumption, but because I think the waste of the production process of fish meal, the whole entire production process of fish meal, is like 1.5% or something like that. So it's an industry with a few waste. And of course, this industry have opportunities that we need to fix. It's not perfect actually, this industry. But for instance, we need to control how fishing vessels are actually fishing these pelagic species, because if, for instance, if they are using trawling method, they are actually damaging the lifeblood of water. And we need to also supervise if they are fulfilling all the quality requirements for a clean production of the fish meal in order to provide a high protein feed to other animals as cattle or agriculture industry. So I wanted to finish my presentation with these 2 final thoughts. We need to learn how to think and how to decide within supply chains under this perspective, this new perspective of a multi-level interconnected system. We need to remember that we as individuals and of course as part of organizations, we are taking decisions every day, and these decisions need to be under this new framework of multi-level interconnected systems of these 4 different levels. And the second one is related with the first one, is that individuals, we as individuals, that we have the power to decide what to buy, as well as organizations we're able to change the way we are connecting the world. And we need to change actually the way we are connecting the world. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. The time is yours now, Professor Daisy.